Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Paul Morrow, Jessica Tarlov, Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. President Trump is keeping them guessing and giving a big deadline on whether the U.S. military is going to get involved in the deadly conflict between Israel and Iran. Now, this comes amid a massive escalation. Officials say more than 70 people were injured after an Iranian missile barrage slammed into a hospital in Israel. The IDF striking back by targeting more Iran nuclear sites, including a reactor. President Trump meeting all day with his top intelligence officials, and Caroline Levitt is sharing the president's latest thinking.
I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon. All they need is a decision from the supreme leader to do that. And it would take a couple of weeks to complete the production of that weapon, which would, of course, pose an existential threat, not just to Israel, but to the United States and to the entire world.
The conflict between Israel and Iran causing The View to make some pretty outrageous comments and comparisons. Whoopi Goldberg just stepped in it.
I'm sorry, but where the Iranian regime is today in 2025 is nothing compared to the United States.
Hanging black people. So
it is not even.
Yeah,
I think it's very different to live in the United States in 2025 than it is to live in Iran.
Not if you're black.
Not for everybody.
Not if you're black.
Earlier today, I imagined what it would have been like if you had been on the set and what you would have said to Whoopi when she said that.
Well, her reaction is born of identity politics. If you help these Jews, you're going to hurt the blacks, which is weird coming from a lady named Goldberg. But I believe on The View, they have a rule. One panelist has to say something so crazy every day that everybody else looks sane. And that day was Whoopi's, and Joy Behar and Sunny Huston suddenly don't look totally bat poop nuts. But I think she's like, it seems to me since Trump, 2015, 2016, she's now just operating on non-conscious thinking. Everything is a reflex, and she says what's easily retrievable. It's Whoopi AI. It's not even a real Whoopi anymore. She just has race, and she just pulls out of it. You know, one of the many benefits of Trump is his refusal to land in the world of the half opinion. You know, he thinks it through. You know, they're both sides traffic in half opinions. We don't want war, half opinion. We don't want Iran to get the nuclear bomb, a half opinion. And those are the easiest opinions to have because no one's going to disagree with you on either one because you're not discussing the risk of both decisions. Both decisions have risks. So in a weird way, half opinions are propaganda. Telling the story without a risk is a lie, and it helps you advance your cause. That's propaganda. So then you look at Trump. This is a good example. You know, people can say Americans could drop bunker busters to destroy Iran's facilities. That's a half opinion. What does Trump do? He says, do they work? Mm-hmm. You know, he thinks it through by asking the question that bureaucrats don't ask because they don't want to sound stupid. But he's actually asking, does it work? And I think that's why we elected him. One of the reasons is that he isn't going to do anything where he's going to lose. That's why I didn't believe that he lost in 2020. And he's right. But right. He won't step in until he knows it's going to work. And so you voted for him. You got to trust him.
The other thing I was thinking about, Paul, is he's got a remarkable skill of keeping people guessing, but being very transparent.
Yeah.
And it must be very confounding to people in Iran who are like trying to figure this guy out. But he's basically showing you his work, but also keeping it a secret.
Yeah, and when you think about it, he's talking about a deal, right? And they're sitting in Tehran saying, "Deal? What deal? What is the what are the options that we have here?" Because if you think about it, where do we stand? Our red line is absolutely no enrichment, right? And we're supposed to have unfettered access to all the enrichment uranium enrichment sites. That's the deal we got now. Mm-hmm. That's what the AIEI is supposed to be doing right now, and they told us to go pound sand. I think really what's going on, I'm not advocating for any of the positions here, because at the end of the day, you have to remember something. They have a lot more facts than we do on Capitol Hill. Trump is operating off of far more facts than we are. So at the end of the day, as Craig said, we elected him, we got to trust him, right? But the immediate issue is Ferdow. I mean, that's just it. So you don't have to go all the way. People talk about regime change, everything else. You just got to mitigate the immediate issue. If you do that, and like I said, take the deal off the table. If you get rid of the immediate threat, well, then you bought some time. Now, ultimately, regime change is where this thing has to devolve to. At the end of the day, whether you like it or not, you have an adversary who cannot exist without that bomb. The mullahs cannot list long-term without that bomb. They learned the lessons of Gaddafi. We need this thing. They're going to keep trying. That's just all there is to it. So you got this adversary. They say they want to kill you. They're trying to get the bomb. At the end of the day, at some point, they got to go. But you don't need that right now. You just got to mitigate the immediate problem, which is Ferdow. What I think he's doing is, and that's why I think you can see this 2-week window, the last thing he wants is any American blood here. And right now, the Iranians still do have some offensive capacity. They do have the ability to fire missiles, maybe hit some American assets, and in many ways, almost worst, is hitting some of our adversaries, some of our allies. You get some dead Europeans and et cetera in some place inside the red zone in Iraq. We got an international Megillah. That's the last thing he wants. I think he's buying time, waiting till they are out of that capacity. And then, my own opinion, I think that's when he moves. And then ultimately, long term, if you notice, we hit their internal security. That's the besieged. That's the one who keep their people down. The Israelis took that out yesterday. They're also now hacking the media and saying, rise up, unlike what we saw during the Green Revolution. I think long term, that's the second stage. But the first stage is Ferdow. And from where I sit, you got to mitigate that.
Dana, can I ask Paul a question? It's important.
Yes, sure.
What's a Megillah?
Do I have to explain all the NYPD-isms to you?
I don't know what it is either. I thought I would look
You
it
never
up
heard
later.
the term Megillah?
No, what is it?
It's like related to Fugazi.
He said, Paul used the phrase pound sand. I have a feeling that if they do go through with this, that's exactly what this would be pounding some sand.
Yeah, when he says it could last 2 weeks, I'm looking at what 2 weeks is away from, and that would be July 4th. So I could see Trump lighting up the skies over Iran on the 4th of July, or I could see him doing it this weekend. Maybe he's bluffing. I have no idea, but it looks like it's moving pretty quickly because if you take out the underground nuclear site, you can't just sit back and watch and let the Iranians retaliate and hit your bases and hit your ships. You have to have a pretty significant bombing campaign to neutralize any sort of Iranian offensive capacity. That's missiles, command and control. You got to hit everything. So you're just not a sitting duck. When we think about negotiations, Trump's made it pretty clear. This thing's either going peacefully or violently. And the decision's the Ayatollah. Ayatollah's 86 years old. He's been in power for 3 decades. He's a religious revolutionary. Is this the kind of guy that's going to negotiate? He's a proud old man that's probably going to go down fighting. Now, the question is, if you hit these underground facilities, does he stay in power? Can he stay in power? Can he wield power in a country where you've lost your ballistic missiles and you've lost your only leverage, which is your nuke? I don't know. So do you leave him in power and wait for a coup, or do the Israelis get so pissed after hospital strikes that they're going to just go in and launch a decapitation strike? I don't know. The thing about Iraq and Iran and makes it a lot different is the geography. If you look at Iran, it's surrounded by mountain ranges. All right, so it's very hard for foreign fighters to pour in from all over the region. And not only do they have the borders that are surrounded by mountains, I mean, look at that. You have 2 major deserts in there. So once you get over the mountains and through, you have deserts you have to go through. So this is not Iraq. And also, if you do, God help us, if you do go in and there is some sort of coup and you have to maintain some sort of government there, remember what happened in Iraq, the de-Baathification. That backfired. We fired everyone in the military, every cop, every civil administrator, every bureaucrat, and then all those guys got pissed off and then left with a gun to form a militia, and there was no one to run the country. So things have been learned. Or, since all options are on the table, Dana, I could see Trump just letting the Israelis get their hands even dirtier and launch commando raids into this site. So when he says all options on the table, they are, and I agree. I trust Donald Trump to make the right decision here. Whatever he does, I think it'll be the right call.
What's also interesting, Jessica, is the polling that came out last night that shows a great majority of the American people are concerned that Iran could have a nuclear weapon and that they support action. And I think What's interesting, you could get online and you can go way down deep and you could be online for 2 days straight while you're sitting at home waiting to come back to work until the medicine kicks in. And then you get a poll like that and you're like, oh, okay, actually people are pretty sane.
Yeah, I think another question that the Fox poll asked was about does the Israeli strikes make the world more dangerous? And 59% said yes to that. So you can, as usual with polling, you can find the answer that you want in there. And I would say it's a uniform feeling that people know that Iran is an adversary, that they don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. But once you start having a conversation about regime change, Americans get very skittish about this. And it was the first time, at least, that I had heard a senator mention it this morning. Tom Tillis was being interviewed, and he said it's time for regime change. And that is something that really flies in the face of Donald Trump, the peacetime president, or Donald Trump as the campaigner. I think that if this is packaged as we are going to take out their nuclear weapons, but we are not trying to take over their country, and we're not going to get engaged in decades-long wars that we have no business being in, people remember what that was like, and they don't enjoy it. It's also interesting to me, Senator Mark Warner, who is the ranking Democrat on the Intel Committee, was echoing what Tulsi Gabbard had testified to back in March, where she essentially said, Iran is not on the precipice of having this weapon.
Do you believe that?
I don't know. I don't think Mark Warner has any reason to back up Tulsi Gabbard for fun, right? He didn't vote for her. He doesn't think that highly of her. And so I believe that Bibi Netanyahu is taking advantage of the situation, and he knows that Trump is going to back him up, and that Trump believes that the Israelis have earned this. I'm going to use the point, Greg, that I was supposed to make 2 days ago, that he has faith in the Israelis to be doing what's in quote unquote, the best interests of the region. But you're going to have a real issue if this turns into a redux, putting aside the topography of Iran, of what we have already seen before, and you're not going to have an American appetite for it. I also wanted to note, I was listening to Admiral Stavridis, I always mess up pronouncing his name, and he was talking about the implications of hitting Fordo, and he said you could essentially be creating a dirty bomb. So you explode this nuclear facility, and then you have enriched uranium just flying around in the sky, and you could be poisoning people. And that's something that I hadn't heard discussed before and should be a consideration. But if Israel can essentially get rid of their missile capacity, just, wear them out, maybe that's what the 2 weeks is. We'll see what they have after 2 weeks.
Can I throw in one curveball at the end here?
Is it a Megillah?
Yes, here's the Megillah. If Ukraine had kept their nuclear weapon,
this wouldn't have happened.
There wouldn't have been
That's the Gaddafi
right.
factor.
But also they were told that we would protect them if we took away their nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so
and we didn't.
Maybe we don't do that again.
I gotta say, I was away for 2 weeks. That was not the take I expected.
Yes.
I am